wrestling diehards only, this is the Idaho Mat Chat Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. This is a new endeavor we're undertaking here on IdahoSports.com. It is Idaho's only singularly dedicated to the sport of wrestling podcast in the state. It is the Mat Chat Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com. My name is Brandon Baney. I'm joined by Al Fontes, Bryan Zollinger, and Jacob Eck. We're going to be on every Tuesday night during the wrestling season at this time, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific time, talking with you, the wrestling fans, talking about the biggest storylines, the biggest athletes, teams we're keeping an eye on. I'm so excited to do this. Bryan, you've done a couple of these like state tournament preview shows with me in the past, and I know the wrestling community are diehard fans. So this is why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this. I just came from a middle school quad, and I mean, it was just all the buzz at a middle school tournament that wrestling was getting this coverage, having Al in the States and the state rankings that came out today. I mean, wrestling world is a buzz, ready for an insane season to start. So wrestling community is pumped about this, and I hope they all join us and ready to get down and talk about some of the fun matchups. And it's going to be a wild season in the state of Idaho.
Definitely. So all of the fans that are tuning into this live, you can catch this a couple of different ways: the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, the Facebook page, or the IdahoSports.com Twitter account. So wherever you're watching tonight, thanks for being with us. Hit that like button if you're watching, and even hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. That helps everybody that comes back tomorrow or the next day. It's a little easier for them to find with all the social media algorithms if you hit that like button. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. And then we want to take your questions. If there's a team you want us to talk about, a wrestler, you want to give somebody a shout out, go ahead and leave a comment. We'll throw it up on the screen and talk about it there. So let's start with just a quick intro. You know, we can introduce our audience to everybody and who we are and our backgrounds. I'll start. My name is Brandon Baney. I'm from the state of Montana originally. And the school that I went to would be like a 4A school here in Idaho. It's this small town called Stevensville, Montana. It's kind of like a Shelley almost, would be a similar community. We were the only high school in our entire classification that did not have wrestling. So all we had was basketball. So that's all I knew growing up. So I am a wrestling novice, which is why I've surrounded myself with really smart people that know a lot about the sport. So in terms of, you know, what I bring to the table, I'm more the facilitator. I'm like the point guard. I'm going to dish it off to all of these great guests that we have each and every week. I'm still learning the ropes in terms of wrestling, but man, I couldn't have picked a better state to learn in. There's so many great athletes and teams and coaches here in the state of Idaho. So that's a little bit about me. Let's go to Bryan next. Bryan, just give us a quick little background info on yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I mean, I've been around wrestling in Idaho since mid-'80s. I went to high school at Sugar Salem. At the time, we were a powerhouse. I think we won 3 of the 4 state titles when I was there. And my senior year, we came in second, didn't quite get it done. Wrestled collegiately at Boise State and BYU before I was at BYU when they cut the program there, and it was heartbreaking. Wrestled at Boise State when the legend Chris Owens was on the coaching staff, so I got to work under one of my when I was in junior high. He was one of my heroes, as he was just dominating the high school scene in Idaho, and been around it since then. My dad was president of USA Wrestling in Idaho for probably about 15 years until about 5 years ago, and so I've been around it my whole life. All my kids, I've got 5 that wrestle, including 2 girls now, and plan on being around wrestling for the next 20 years as well or longer.
Yeah, you're a great beacon and a source for wrestling in the state of Idaho, certainly. Let's go to Jacob now. Jacob, you also have roots in East Idaho, like Bryan.
Yep. So I grew up in Teton Valley, went to Teton High School. I wrestled for what is now the Timberwolves, formerly known as the Redskins. And then started traveling a little bit, wrestling a little bit, and, went to California, Colorado, and then found my way back here in Idaho and decided I really like coaching kids and, did okay, doing club stuff and traveling, and then can't get away from it. It's my favorite thing to do. So, now I'm on a podcast with the greatest man in wrestling, Al Fontes. So, I might have made it.
Well, we'll get to Al in just a second. We want full disclosure here. So you are a high school coach as well, right, Jacob?
So I'm not coaching high school this season. We got a lot of stuff going on. I'm doing club stuff and, helping out Idaho Sports, and then we're having a baby in February. So that's the busiest time of wrestling season. So, it's nice to sit in the stands and, go team a little bit this year. It's a good thing for me.
Definitely. Well, congratulations on the new addition to the Eck family.
Well, and it's a boy, so now I know girls wrestle live. We have a 5-year-old, and now I have a boy, so I got a few years. I'm sure I'll see Bryan's face in the next 20, but we'll be here.
All right, sounds good. And now let's go to Al Fontes. What an intro Jacob just had for you, Al. Are you ready to live up to that?
No, I'm humble. No, I started wrestling in 1978 in middle school. Started coaching when I was a freshman in high school. That was back in 1980. Been coaching ever since. I'm a coach at Rocky Mountain High School right now. Great group of kids. I've been started writing back in the early 1990s. I started writing for the California Wrestler. Also been writing for Wrestling USA, most of the magazines like Amateur Wrestling News, etc. Moved to Idaho. I retired from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, where I worked for 30 years in the research and development facility of Department of Energy. But I moved here 2 years ago. I didn't know what to expect when I came here, but the last 2 years I've been having a good time just trying to create a platform. My goal as a promoter of wrestling is to bring the national conversation of Idaho in the circle nationally. There's a lot of good things going on here, and it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, and you haven't been shy about that, Al. Your number one goal is to promote the great wrestlers that the state of Idaho has. And I think that's our common goal here. All four of us would agree that the reason why we're doing this, the reason why we kick out all the content that we do is for our high school and even middle school athletes. We want to shine the spotlight on these athletes as much as we can. And so this is why we're doing this. It's not about us. It's not about, oh, Al, you're such a great writer. You are a great writer, but you're doing it for the love of the game and these kids. So
it's for the kids, and when I first came here, I was just amazed at the wrestling culture here. It's really great, and these kids aren't getting enough recognition. And like I said, the goal is to bring the conversation to Idaho and nationally. And it's getting there.
Definitely. Okay. Well, we want the fans that are watching tonight to be part of the conversation. So if you have a specific question as we're talking about teams or individuals tonight, or an athlete, a team you want us to talk about, throw it in the comments and we will we'll throw it up on the screen and we'll talk about it. But I guess we should start with some season preview type stuff. And really, we had the opening week of competition last week. It was mostly duels, but I'll just go around the horn. Bryan, as we are approaching the season, what's one team that you are excited to see in action this year?
Well, it's tough to say just one. I have to start with Meridian. I mean, they are just loaded with, not only just great high school wrestlers, but they've got D1 commits on that team. I mean, they are just stacked top to bottom. That's a team that could compete with any team nationally. Blair Academy type roster at Meridian this year. I mean, they are just loaded. So if I had to choose one, it would be Meridian, but there's several others. South Fremont, there's just some other teams that are just stacked. But going with one, Meridian, that's just going to be fun to watch. I mean, we're talking college level wrestling at these high school duels. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I saw them at the Donley duels. I mean, you have Jason Mara that's going to Stanford Division I. You have Cade White that's committed to Oregon State. You got several other. You got Hudson Rogers. You got Twait, who's a solid kid. I don't know if he's going anywhere yet, but that kid is definitely Division I capable. So they were solid. They're hard.
I'm going.
Al, is there another team? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Jacob. Tell us why.
Bishop Kelly with Zollinger making his high school debut. He's U15 world champ. makes all the Greco world teams. Just absolutely ridiculous. And it's the first time people are going to watch him in Idaho, on a high school level. And it's just crazy. And then Martino, his older brother's is Princeton. It's pretty, it's a pretty good thing to be looking up to every day, or Christmas parties. Your brother comes home from Princeton and you get to wrestle a little bit with him. And then, Castagnetto moving over there. He's going to add to the lineup. The Valdez brothers, they might have 7-8 guys, but they have 7-8 guys that could make the finals or win it. It could be 4A, a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to agree with him. I saw him this past weekend. I've been watching Jaden Skellinger since he was a kid. He originally came from California. I know he's been here for 10 years. He's a student of the sport. The Valdez brothers are year-round. Castaneda, all these guys, they're students of the sport. They work year-round, and it's starting to show. They're building a culture there. And I say in the next couple of years, they're going to be very difficult to beat.
Yep.
Yeah, my first introduction to Wyatt Castanetto, he's from Glens Ferry and moved to BK. My first interaction with him was at state baseball, and he's one heck of a catcher. He's a great baseball player as well. So that's the thing with a lot of these guys you talked about. They do wrestle all year round, but a lot of these guys also are multi-sport athletes. That's a fine line to keep sometimes, right? Jacob, is somebody who's coached recently, how do you keep that balance of you want your athletes to compete in other sports at the same time you want them getting in that off-season work?
Well, I really think most of these kids are the greatest athletes, period. Any sport. They go, they're training 11 months out of the year, lifting, running, wrestling, takes a toll on your body, and then they're elite level athletes in football or baseball. And it's just, kind of incredible what they can do and what these kids are capable of now. They love it so dang much that they'll go to baseball practice for 2 hours and then wrestle for 2 hours and then lift in the morning for an hour. And there's a reason why they're such great athletes everywhere else. And it's probably because wrestling is the core of everything they do. So,
yeah, I like to add on that. So coming from California, coming in here, just in this Treasure Valley, and I know up north, and even in the east, I talked about the culture earlier. With the amount of coaches that have D1 experience or years of experience, then you have world-class coaches like Ivanov, or you have Chris Owens, and all these coaches. They're creating a culture here that the wrestling aptitude for the younger kids coming up is far greater than it was 20 years ago. It's incredible what you're starting to see. So the kids coming up the pipeline may be even better. So it's incredible what we're seeing here.
Definitely.
It's definitely just going to keep getting better.
Yeah.
Just the younger Martino, for the most recent example, his brother's at Princeton. So everything that his brother's starting to acquire knowledge-wise is trickling down at home. And, it's going to continue to go, those kids looking up to him. And it happens everywhere. All these kids, Jason Mara, Hudson, all those kids in that Meridian room in the spring, summer, and fall preseason, they're seeing, the best wrestlers in the entire country. That's who they have to look at. So Idaho's okay for a little bit, right? The future is going to be okay.
Yeah. Al talks about the population base of Idaho, in terms of compared to other states around the country. Here in Idaho, we're on the lower end, right? We're bottom 10 in terms of, total population, and the amount of kids that are now going to the D1 level per our population has to be top 10 in the country per capita, right, Al?
It is one of the best per capita. We're probably one of the best small school states in the country. We have 1.9 million people, but if you look at international wrestling, the Republic of Dagestan, which is in southern Russia, has 3 million people, but they've produced the most world champs. Is because they have a system in place. And that's what I see here. I see a system in place where kids can be at the highest level if they choose to be. The resources are here.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that have good systems in place, the team that I'm most excited to see this year, guys, is Ryrie, because they have been a 2A, 1A powerhouse for how long? They won, I think it was 7 titles in a row. Then they took second 2 years ago, and then they got back to the top of the podium. That was such a dramatic finish last year at the 2A championship. It came down to the heavyweight match. Ryrie just barely eked out the win. We had a great picture of, the Ryrie coach and the heavyweight wrestler hugging, and it was such a great scene. And so, I'm excited to see, can Ryrie continue to ride that momentum again? Bryan, what do you think at that 2A, 1A level?
I definitely think Ryerie's going to make some noise. It's always fun to watch New Plymouth. They've got, they're coming back pretty loaded. Coaches there have just done an amazing job. So, I mean, I think Ryerie's got to be the favorite just because they are what they are. Coach Harris, Coach Parkinson. I mean, they bring back a loaded roster, and they just make tough kids. I've got to say Ryerie's the favorite. Being in East Idaho, they're great to go watch. I mean, just watch them put the hammer down on some of these big 5A schools is just it's crazy to see. They fill that room there, but you can't ignore New Plymouth there and what they've done there in the last few years, and they're bringing some hammers back this year. So it's going to be a fun race. I think Ryrie comes in as the favorite, but New Plymouth is definitely going to push. Melba, Grace, Newbie has done a great job with Grace, and their girls squad at Grace is going to be fun to watch too. Coach Newbie has done an amazing job recruiting girls. So there's a lot of 2A, 1A schools that are going to be fun to watch, but I'm with you on Ryrie. They're always fun to watch. They just bring a tough attitude, and their kids get better as the season goes on. They're ready to go come state tournament time. So I'm with you there 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
No, you're good. We're starting to get some comments from the fans. Jed Ray Clark says, yes, shout out to Ryrie. And this is what we want. We want the fans coming in. Rep your favorite team. Rep your favorite athlete.
Coach Clark, South Fremont, you like I said in my opening comments, they're going to be fun to watch. One of the funnest things coming up early on the schedule is that before the Raleigh Lane tournament, we have that duel with Meridian and South Fremont, which, I don't know how many total state titles you've got coming into that duel, but that is going to be a fun, those upper weights when you get into, White, Mara, Hobbs from South Fremont, the Clark brothers, Gooley from Meridian. I mean, there's going to be some great matches in that opening duel. And I hope Idaho wrestlers that are there for Raleigh Lane, just pack that gym for that. And the college duel, we have Coach Lords coaching, and I just went blank. Carl Albert, one of the duels there. So we've got a couple Idaho coaches bringing their college squads in for that. And I think people are going to be surprised. I think we're going to pack that gym for that duel, and looking forward to it. So it's good to see Coach Clark watching us here. And Coach Snyder from Idaho Falls also chimed in and gave a shout out to American Falls, who, Jacob knows a little bit about. He's been there and knows what they're bringing back. So, and Coach Snyder at Idaho Falls is kind of rebuilding that Idaho Falls team there, but he's got some hammers he's bringing up from Idaho Falls High School. So we got some high school coaches tuning in already.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. Al, were you going to say something about the 2A, 1A conversation?
Oh, it was about Ryrie. I think it came down to, it wasn't the final score at heavyweight 4-3. It was that tight. Yeah. And I think this year, I have to, just by memory, I think both New Plymouth and Ryrie have about 8 placers coming back. So it seems like it's going to come down to those extra kids, bonus points. It could be
Ryrie's freshman 98. Better watch out. I'm telling you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Braylon Moon is an absolute dog in him. He'll be a tough kid in February.
Yep,
I watched him at a takedown tournament. That kid's he's ready to go today.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's Coach Clark again. Ryrie is amazing at developing kids. Their kids aren't always kids you hear a ton about, but every kid on their roster is solid. Al, that's what you were talking about, those bonus points and those
bonus points.
Yeah, for sure. Coach Snyder also says, "Go Tigers." I'm assuming that's Idaho Falls Tigers. That's the most common team name there is in the state, but
it is. Coach Snyder is the new head coach at Idaho Falls High School for the rest of the team. So, yeah, for sure. And I have to admit with Jacob on Braylon Moon, I saw Ryrie up at the North Fremont dual tournament this past weekend. I went up there and watched that and talked to Braylon for a little bit. He used to wrestle with my daughter when he was smaller. So I watched Braylon, and I agree with Jacob. He's going to be fun to watch at 98 pounds there.
Yeah, for sure. Just to wrap up our 2A, 1A conversation, I got to know Coach Newbie from Grace more so during football season, right? Grace went on this great run all the way to the state championship game. He's the head football coach and the head wrestling coach. And I was doing a pregame interview with him before the championship. And I said, you've got this group of seniors that have all come through the ranks together. They've all played, youth basketball and little league baseball and football growing up together. And then he kind of looked at me and goes, and wrestling. And I said, oh yeah, yes. And wrestling. Right. I'm not always thinking of it first of mind, but yeah, I think Grace is going to be a fun team to watch this year as well with Coach Newbie. Here's a comment from Amy Johnson Bale. Idaho is helping build at the youth level as well. that's really what it takes, isn't it, Al? You're talking about you're seeing the building blocks in place for Idaho. It does. It starts at the youngest levels.
Yeah, it does. It just takes a lot of work. It's a full commitment, just a level of wrestling at the lowest levels, and just the opportunities to get better is here, and you're starting to see a higher level. A lot of it comes, Bryan, you wrestled at Boise State. You have a lot of Boise State coaches out there, former wrestlers. That's huge, and there's a lot of experienced coaching out here at all levels, and that makes these kids that much better at a younger. The wrestling aptitude and the access to better wrestling is prevalent here.
Definitely. So we've kind of identified the heavy hitters, right? The traditional powers, your South Fremonts, Meridian in recent years, Ryrie, Bishop Kelly. What's one sleeper squad? We've all kind of pegged who we think the top 3-4 teams are going to be, but I'm going to ask each of you for a team that's maybe under the radar right now that has a chance to surprise. Let's see, Jacob, you want to go first?
Yeah. I think a few things come into it. I think in 3A, if certain kids make certain weights and go certain ways, Teton will be way better than they've been in the past. There's a lot of things that been going on up there, and new coach and new attitude. Some kids fall into the right weights. It could be, they could really go from being outside to having a lot of kids place and making some noise. And then, I think that nobody's really talking in 3A specifically yet is Fruitland. Fruitland's going to be good. They've been good and then fell back a little bit. And all of a sudden you see a lot of Fruitland kids doing really well again. So it could be interesting. And then my last one's going to be Bonneville. They had a good Bucks Bags or Donnelly Duels, whatever it's called, now it's changed. But at the beginning of the year, I was looking at everything. I didn't think Bonneville was going to be, up towards the top. And next thing you know, they make one of the better pools. They have a good duel record, and there's good things happening. So it could be a surprise.
Yeah, Bryan, you got some sleeper teams.
Yeah, I think at the 3A level, I think people should watch out for Buell. Buell is coming in. I don't know if they're necessarily a sleeper. They're bringing a lot of kids back, but I think Buell is definitely one school that could make some noise that not on a lot of people's radar. At the 4A level, I think Jerome was bringing a handful of kids back that, they could be a sleeper team as well. And it's going to be fun watching Nampa at the 5A level. They're bringing a lot back, top of the 4A now moving to 5A. I think they're going to have a hard time competing with Meridian, but they're going to have some kids in the finals and some kids there. So I'd say those are 3 sleeper teams I'm watching out for: Buell, Jerome, and Nampa.
Yeah, you mentioned Nampa having to make that jump from 4A to 5A. Lisa Wood giving a shout out to the other team that's making that adjustment, Middleton. What do you guys think about Middleton? Making the jump up to 5A is tough, right?
Yeah.
I look at the 4A, and sometimes I think the 4A is tough. Nampa came up from the 4A, but the 4A's got some tough teams. It's going to come down to numbers for the top 2 in 5A. It's going to come down to that second wrestler and how many they get in the finals. Yeah. So it's going to be tight.
Yeah. Al, you got a sleeper squad this year?
Nampa in the 5A.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, Meridian's going to be very difficult to overcome because they have second teamers that are good enough to be in the medal round. So same as Post Falls. Nampa, they may have a few, but it's going to be, depends how things play out, but they could be a team that could be right there in the mix if other things happen. But after that, in the 5A, those are the top 3 teams. I don't think anyone's going to pass those 3.
For sure. It'll be pretty interesting to see.
The shout out from Middleton, I have to agree. You got Hawkland there, you got Blandford, you got some kids that are going to make some noise at that level. And so, both those schools going to 5A is just going to add to the competition of 5A because they were both pretty dominant in 4A and both bringing most of their squads back this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Jerome, I think, Bryan. And so Jerome, of course, their athletic director, Scott Burton, he's a broadcaster for us at IdahoSports.com as well. He and I do a podcast every week covering Magic Valley athletics. He's kind of like me. He has more of a basketball background than a wrestling background, but he got the job as the athletic director at Jerome. his very first year on the job, Jerome wins the 4A state wrestling championship. And, he's like taking all the credit for it. And, hey, we did so great. And we like to give him a hard time about that. So,
yeah, they're bringing a good squad back. I mean, Williamson and moving up to 95, he should be the favorite there. Lockett at 82. I mean, they've got a lot of good kids, and they'll bring the numbers in that district and should come through the district tournament with a lot of numbers, which makes a big difference when you get to the state tournament. And without Nampa and Middleton, them and Minico are probably going to have the most kids there. So, they're going to make some noise.
Always. Let's see. IdahoSports.com. I think this is our boss, Paul Kingsbury. He says, we're all looking good. He's watching us. He's on his 25th anniversary date with his wife tonight at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and he's checking in under the table on his phone. So
dedication.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Thank you for checking in. And as you're watching this, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're at, hit the like or subscribe button while you're hanging out. It's going to help out everybody that wasn't able to be here live tonight. Tune in tomorrow, the next day, etc. So hit that like button. It's going to take 2 seconds. And, this is what we want to do each and every week. We want to have a conversation with the wrestling fans. And so if there's a team, an athlete you want us to talk about, throw it up on the screen. Here's Cade Sessions. Snake River is dangerous every year, always ready to battle when state comes around, and just seem to get better throughout the year. What do you think about Snake River, Jacob?
I got to watch them this weekend, and they're way better than I thought they were going to be. From 120 up, they're still figuring out. I mean, their 13-pounder is going to be returning in Benson. I think he took. He was top 5 last year, but all the way, 38 is Eastern Gardner, and then Gary Hunter, and all the way up. Their heavyweights, probably arguably outside of Aiden Ateo, the best heavyweight in the entire state.
I'll agree with that.
He is very, very good, and he looked every bit of it all weekend. It was impressive.
Yeah, Al, speaking of Ateo, he's kind of one of the big dogs, or what you've called the tier 1 wrestlers in the state of Idaho. Here's a comment from Bryan Zollinger talking about another tier 1 wrestler, Mac Mauger, the Blackfoot Bronco, going to Mizzou is fire for Idaho. Al, we were talking about this. There's a lot of D1 guys in this class of 23. That's so exciting to see.
6.
Yeah, 6 total. Can you remind everybody who those 6 are? Everybody knows, but
you got Mac Mauger, you got Coulter is going to Mizzou, you got Coulter Burton going to Oklahoma State, you got Cade Craig going to Utah Valley, you have Jason Mara going to Stanford, we have Cade White going to Oregon State, and then we have Aiden Ateo going to Oregon State as well.
And then Frothinger from Eagle, right?
He's Nebraska. Going to Nebraska, wrestling for Coach Manning.
Yeah. And I think everybody forgets Mauger and Burton are both 2024s. They're only juniors. So
that's right.
They're going to be around for a while. They're going to still be a problem in the state for 2 more years, not just 1.
Yes, Lucinda reminding us that Mac is class of 24. And here's Chuck Shank saying Diedrich Navarro from Nampa, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he's got anyone picking him up yet, but I've been talking to a lot of college coaches, and I know his coaches have. He's someone they need to look at because wherever he goes, he's going to do well. Hard worker.
I saw his pictures at Arizona State, Oregon State, waiting for Diedrich.
Yeah, and his dad's an alumni at Oregon State. His dad wrestled there.
Yeah. So Bryan, the expression is the rising tide lifts all boats, and with all of these high-end D1 wrestling prospects, that gets more eyeballs to other athletes on the wrestling squad that may not be D1, but maybe are D2, D3, NAIA wrestlers. So by having these tier 1 guys out front, it's getting everybody a chance to show these college coaches what they can do, right?
Absolutely. And all of these guys, you talk Mauger, I mean, you got Henderson there at Blackfoot that won a state title last year. You got at every one of those schools, kids on those teams are going to be looked at. South Fremont's got a lot of kids. Hobbs going to be a 4-time state champion, won a folk style national title. And those teams with those hammers on them are just getting better. They're getting the attention. You see what Meridian's doing there. It just builds. And then you go to the little kids tournaments and you see the size of the club where these kids are. The little kids are excited about it, and it just builds and builds. And we're in a good place. And these guys are kind of leading the pack. you watch Ridge Lovett at Nebraska now for the last couple of years. And that's really a lot of kids. My kids, when Nebraska duels, they're glued to the television set, watching Ridge and now having these 6-7 kids D1 out of Idaho, and there could be more. I mean, you had the Matthews that graduated last year is wrestling in Colorado. I mean,
Northern Colorado.
Colorado.
Tate Gillette's there too.
Yep. And so it's, it's fun to watch, and it's getting the little kids excited, and it's only going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm so excited to see the future of Idaho, but the wrestling present in Idaho is certainly exciting as well. Here's Kristen Mara giving a shout out to Hudson Rogers, another high caliber guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm excited for him to be back following his knee injury, wrestled Fargo, All-American, made the finals in Iowa preseason. It's good to have Hudson back, and it's interesting now that he's at Meridian.
Yeah,
5A was already crazy, but now it adds a lot more to it.
And that weight class is just going to be fun to watch. I was talking to Hunter Hobbs at South Fremont's dad. They may cut down to wrestle Hudson Rogers just to have those hammers meet Hobbs and Rogers, who are good friends. You got Rogers, you got Fulmer from Teton. Jacob mentioned Teton earlier. Riker Fulmer up at Teton is an absolute, just a technician. Won the Tiger Grizz twice now, and he's going to be fun to watch there. So we could get some really good matches. I think Hudson Rogers is the favorite in most of those, but there could be some really good matches at 170 between the conferences this year.
Definitely. We've got a shout out here from Skylar Beck. Cadence Beck, let's talk about before we get out of here, Al. I know you've been so impressed with the growth of girls wrestling in the state of Idaho, and mm-hmm. Cadence Beck is one of Idaho's best on the female side.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's still in its infancy. I was in California and watched it start to grow. Once they made it a sanctioned event, it exponentially grew. And it's all the way up to a 32-girl bracket in California. Obviously, it's a bigger state and it's not divisionalized. But just what we're seeing here is exactly what I was seeing on a national level. But what's really impressive is just for the amount of wrestlers we have coming up the pike, and it's growing each year. We have 9 girls ranked nationally, the national girls. That's impressive for just the number of girls we have so far. So I see the grassroots growing, the middle schools growing. Even where I'm coaching, we went from a couple girls. We have about 12, 13 girls this year. So, and you got Alyssa Randos, I think she's a 4 or 5-time All-American at Fargo and Nationals. You got Mia Furman, who is probably placed at 5 different national tournaments. The list is growing. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and we can't talk about Cadence Beck without talking about the very sad news that was, just a little over a month ago. But her dad, Andrew Beck, who was such a pioneer for wrestling in the state of Idaho, tragically passed away far too early. Bryan, I know he was just an icon in the state of Idaho for wrestling, and taken from planet Earth just far too soon.
Yeah, just one of the greatest human beings you'd ever meet. I can't think of a tournament I ever went to that Andrew wasn't there saying hi. How are your daughters doing? And Cadence is carrying on his legacy. She's just an amazing athlete and just so good. I watched her, at Fargo, just the way she builds up her teammates, the girls. It's going to be fun to watch her this year because she is an absolute hammer. I think she just actually signed with was it Eastern Oregon that she signed with, I believe. So she's going to be fun to watch. And her dad, Andrew, he gave so much to USA Wrestling in the high school programs and just driving those kids around for years and years. And I will miss his smiling face at all these tournaments. And you're right, just an absolute tragedy. But, he did a good job. Cadence is a wonderful young lady, and she's going to do amazing things.
Yeah, I think we're getting some Skylar Beck says, yep, saying that she's going to EOU for Cadence. That's Lucinda Rogers as well. And I think Lucinda said it best. I can't say it any better. Let's talk about Andrew Beck, how grateful we are for what he did to grow women's wrestling in Idaho. He will be missed for sure. Certainly just a beacon of light in Idaho, taken way too soon, unfortunately. So, but like you said, Cadence continuing that family legacy. Can't wait to see what she does this year. and in one of Idaho's, smallest communities as well, up there in Craigmont at Highlands. So, okay. Coach Snyder wants us to talk about, besides Raleigh, what other tournaments are you excited to watch this year? Al, you got a tournament you're keeping an eye on besides Raleigh?
When it comes to Idaho, it's Raleigh Lane. I'm also looking on the national scale too. We have a lot of kids that are they're going to the Walsh Ironman in Ohio, which is rated the #1 high school tournament in the country. You're talking a tournament where they're just Division I level kids are going there. We got, I think Mauger's going there. We got some kids from Meridian going there. We have some kids going to the Clovis Dock Buchanan. Those are outside the state, but in state, I'm just looking forward to Raleigh Lane. Being new here, that's the one main tournament I've seen that's the biggest one. So
the granddaddy of them all. Jacob, what's the tournament besides Raleigh that you're excited about?
Probably Tri-State, kind of the same thing. Tri-State's always really good up north, and Washington comes over, obviously, and they have some pretty good Montana kids, and Post Falls gets to every year. It's what does Post Falls have, and then they show up, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, they're still as good as ever. Coach Reardon, that guy's a magician at this point. There's no other way to explain it. He's been, doing this for a long time, and every year they show up to Tri-State, and they have guys dominate the field for the most part, and people that kids you haven't even heard for the most part, and they go good. And then, of course, Tiger Grizz. That's the only other one that, Tri-State's great, Tiger Grizz is great, but Raleigh's where it's at.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say Tri-State as well, as somebody from Montana. This is the chance where I get to, see some Montana schools come and compete. Ryan Skaggs is a broadcaster for us. He lives up in Coeur d'Alene, and he former wrestling coach at Lakeland and over in Washington. And he knows Coach Reardon pretty well up there at Post Falls. And he said he can shred on the guitar pretty well. He said we'd have to bring him on as a guest sometime so he can, play some jams for us. So we'll see if we can get that in the works. Bryan, I'm going to direct this question to you. Alfonso Ramos wants to know, how does Tiger Grizz get back to its former glory? Because Jacob kind of set it up there with, he's excited to see Tiger Grizz. But how does it get back to the level that was established previously?
I think it's on its way. I've been recently spoken with Coach Snyder at Idaho Falls High School and Coach Landon at Skyline. Of course, I'm from Skyline. And my understanding is this year they've had more people that a lot of the Utah schools that have formally come to the tournament, some Wyoming schools that have normally come, and some Nevada schools that are expressing interest again. And I think it's going to be bigger this year and even bigger the next year. So I think it's well on its way to get back to the glory. And that's a fun tournament because you get a mix that you don't get. You get some of these smaller schools, South Fremont, Teton, that show up there. So we get some of the powerhouses, the 2 and 3A powerhouses they'll show up and wrestle with some of the big schools. Columbia comes over from Boise. So that's a fun one. And I think it's on its way back. I think Coach Snyder and Coach Landon want that to be what it was and even better. And it sounds to me like the numbers are going to be there. So I hope it keeps growing. We get some of those, back in the day when when I was in high school, in the finals, I had one Sanderson in the weight below me in the finals in the lineup and one Sanderson above me in the weight. And it was fun to have Wasatch there when they were in their glory days with the Sanderson brothers. And I think it's going to be, it's getting back there. And, one other tournament I think that is also fun to watch that we haven't mentioned is in the Magic Valley, the Red Halverson there, because you just get another mix of wrestlers that you don't normally see. Obviously Raleigh and Tri are the big ones, Tiger Grizz with the mix of the 5A schools, but Red Halverson is another tournament that I'm excited to see every year because you get a mix of schools that you don't normally see in a lot of these other tournaments. So that's another fun one.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting to see as we get deeper into the season, get more, as Al likes to call it, more data that we can use to analyze these teams and these athletes and all of that great stuff. There's a lot of wrestling content at our website, IdahoSports.com. Al did a great job with breaking down every classification around the entire state of Idaho, breaking down his top 20 gems of Idaho wrestling as well. We've brought back, we have the weekly team rankings. The entire staff at IdahoSports.com gets together every week and we hammer out those team rankings. We do top 5 for each classification, and then we do a top 5 for all classifications. We do top 5 for the girls. We brought back the individual rankings, and already we posted those like 3 hours ago, guys, and they have blown up already. I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, it's exciting to have those back. when I sent that out, my phone was blowing up when I was sitting in that middle school duel. Just, what's up with this? Where's this person? What's going on? I was laughing before. My son, he's like, where am I at the 170 rankings? I beat 3, 4, 5, and 6 in those rankings multiple times. And then our 95 pounder was with him, Preston Colvin, who was second at 195 at 220. And so you can't get rankings right. And the more, like Al said, the more data we get, the better those are going to get. But it is so exciting to have that back, and just the talk that's going to do. I would assume the sports boards are going to just start blowing up as the season gets going on, now that content is on the website. The wrestling community is super excited about that. Al started those articles. Every time he posts an article, it's like I have conversations for days and days with everywhere I go. People want to ask, what did you think about this? I didn't know about this kid. And it is super exciting. And like Al said, the more that gets out there, the more we grow this, the more opportunities for kids and big things. And Idaho Sports is just doing great things for wrestling. And it's, between those rankings and this show, the wrestling community is grateful for Idaho Sports and what's going on.
Definitely. And as we do the rankings, it's the first time we've brought them back in a couple of years, especially early on. It's an inexact science. We're talking about hundreds of athletes across the state of Idaho. So if something, slips through the cracks, I'm not encouraging you to lobby by any means, but if there's a kid that, this kid graduated, or, this kid actually wrestles this weight class, send that info to us. Idaho Wrestling News at IdahoSports.com is the email. Idaho Wrestling News at IdahoSports.com, and we'll get that squared away. Okay, we're going to wrap up with 2 questions, and then we'll get out of here. I'm going to try to keep this every night to about 30, 40 minutes. Okay, Steven Adams wants to know, guys, state tourney for the girls. Is it a 16-woman bracket? I haven't looked too far ahead at state and how that's going to be. I know that was a point of consternation last year with how the girls were bracketed. Has anybody looked that far yet?
I've talked to some of the girls' coaches to see where we're at, and I believe the understanding was if they had 500 girls certify, that it was going to be a 16-man bracket. I talked to a couple of girls' coaches this week, and nobody knows for sure. Obviously, today was the last day to do certification. So I would assume within a few days, we're going to know whether it's going to be an 8 again or a 16. I really hope it's a 16, because the more opportunity we give those girls, the quicker it's going to grow. So, everybody should lobby the state, whether or not they make 500. Let's make that a 16-person bracket. Get those girls there, because a lot of them are new to the sport. Like Al said, our school here at Skyline, we've got just a handful of new girls out this year that we didn't last year. And if some of those girls can make it to state, it just grows excitement, shows the other girls in the schools what the opportunities are. So I sure hope we get a 16, but I think we're waiting for the official decision until those numbers come in today. Mm-hmm. So let's hope for 5. I think we're going to be close based on everything I'm hearing.
Yeah, that would be so exciting. And then Coach Snyder wants to know here. Oh, here's Fred Bartlett. He would know. 16. IHSAA approved it today. There we go.
Yes, thank you, Fred. That's amazing news. And I got off the phone with Coach Adams just before we started this show, and he was making sure we threw that out and seeing what we knew. So Coach Adams will be happy to hear that. Thank you, Fred. That's amazing news.
Yeah, Fred says 630 ended up being the number. Wow, that's awesome.
Wow. And gone up 200 or 300%. It's crazy.
That's so awesome. And yeah, Moscow Bears Wrestling watching tonight. Yeah, they heard over 550 girls certified. That is so incredibly awesome to see the number go up so much. Yeah, great news, Coach Snyder says, and we couldn't agree more. Okay, and then let's see. Last question here, and then we'll wrap up. Coach Snyder wants to know, I'll throw this to Jacob, who should we watch at 170 for 4A?
Gotta give me like 5 seconds.
Let me just get Coach Snyder's throwing out. That's where my son is, 4A 170.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I'm pretty familiar with the weight. I'll hear what Jacob says.
Foret from Columbia.
Yep.
He's pretty tough. Canyon Ridge had a 170-pounder do really well. Donnelly, Connor Claiborne. And then it became, your son's actually ranked there. Sorensen from Bonneville. He wrestles quite a bit. John Reimers from Emmett. Those 6 for now is where it's at on rankings. I mean, I think Foret, is probably the guy to beat for now, but It's a long year. February is a long ways away.
I was just gonna say that. We are so early here. Horse hasn't even really left the barn yet. So
Yeah, we have
nothing
yet. We got no idea yet, right?
So, Brandon, I want to say something, if I could, before we get off.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've been doing the Hidden Gem series, the Tier 1 series, the Pioneers for the girls, etc. I've talked to Mac Mauger. I've done Tanner Frothinger, Diedrich Navarro, and several other kids. And I just want to say, and this is a shout out to all the college coaches, if you're watching, these kids are not, every kid I've done so far is exceptional athletic, academic, just great overall kids. And we have to remember, every family I've met, the support system is huge. So shout out to all the parents and the people supporting, because it wouldn't happen without them. I'm just impressed with academics and family support to make this thing solid in this state.
Yeah, and
it's a common theme across the board. Every kid I'm talking to is like, these kids are stand-up kids. So look in Idaho, a lot of great kids.
Yes, and we want to show that exposure, not just for college coaches, but fans. It's hard sometimes to know. Fans up north may not know what's going on in the Treasure Valley and in East Idaho, and so we're hoping to bring everybody together every week for a statewide discussion. Lisa says, awesome podcast, guys. Thank you. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. We're going to do this every Tuesday night, 8:00 Mountain Time, 7:00 Pacific Time. You can catch it live on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, or Twitter account. You can come back later. It's recorded. It'll be saved on all of those platforms as well. We also will have a dedicated podcast feed. If you're more of an audio person, you can subscribe to the Mat Chat Prepcast on your favorite podcast catcher, whether that's Google, Apple, Spotify, etc. And we'll also have these on our website, IdahoSports.com. Across the top of the homepage, you'll see a bunch of different things like, schedules and scoreboards. You'll see one that says Prepcasts. And from there's a drop-down menu to Mat Chat Prepcast. You click on that. We'll have a little player on that webpage. You can listen to the podcast there as well. Well, Al Fontes, Bryan, Zollinger, Jacob Beck, thank you guys for hopping on and doing this. I'm so excited to get this plane off the ground and see where we can fly this bad boy as the season goes along.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. We will be back next Tuesday night to break it all down once again for you here on the Mat Chat Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Thanks for tuning in.